Good morning and welcome to Wise Tech for Wise Money. I'm Gary Wayne, founder of A1 Solutions. We help founders, leadership teams and investors grow more intelligently, combining strategy, process, optimization and practical AI-driven automation. Today's episode is titled From Exit to Identity, Engineering a High-Value Business Sale. Joining me from Florida is Ash Atkinson, founder of Arc Advisory. Ash works with business owners preparing for exit, helping them systemize operations, professionalize financials, structure governance, and ultimately maximize valuation. But what makes this conversation particularly interesting is that Arc doesn't just focus on the transaction. They look at the human transition after the sale as well. Ash, how are you today, and welcome to the show.
Hey Gary, I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. Can't complain. Living in Florida
Well,
now,
welcome.
so
Good to talk to a Brit in Florida.
yeah. You should try it out. It's a nice feel.
Well, I took my kids to Disneyland about 7 or 8 times.
Yeah.
I've been on holiday there several times, but I couldn't persuade my wife to emigrate, but there you go. What drove you from the UK to Florida? Lifestyle opportunity or both?
Yeah, I mean it's a pretty. I'll try and kind of condense the story because we could literally spend our entire time together. Just my story essentially to getting here. But I grew up in a small town called Sudbury in Suffolk, so about hour-ish north of London. And where I grew up, it was very equestrian, a lot of horses, quite rural. I grew up in a farm, basically on a farm. Always rode as a kid, and then essentially when I left school, I decided I actually wanted to pursue that as my career. So I became a professional show jumper, and decided that in the UK I was kind of limited in terms of options and opportunity, and so I had an offer to go to Germany. I spent 2 years living in Germany. I worked for one of the largest horse breeders on the planet, and then just basically being in that network. Allowed me just to basically like meet people from all over the world and really understand the business and just understand business fundamentals, how to sell horses, how to market, how to kind of how businesses operate essentially in that particular sector, which then led me to actually Mexico. So I spent almost 2 years in Mexico. I worked for another large operation down there, breeding and sales operation. Worked for an extremely wealthy guy down there, and then in 2015 had an opportunity and kind of came north into the US. So I was in California first for 2 years, and now I've been in South Florida for the past 9 years now at this point. And yeah, absolutely love it. I mean, so as I said, to try and not go too much deviation and too sort of down a rabbit hole. From the horses, as I said, I built this business, which then it basically converted into being an investment model. So essentially, I would find horses that would fit the US demographic market, which typically in the US, the equestrian world is geared towards the ultra high net worth, not just the 1%, the 0.1% or even 0.001%. And so I would basically take the network I had from Europe. I would buy these horses. I'd bring investors together. We'd bring them to the States, and then we'd sell them on to these individuals, which kind of then helped me start to build a network, especially in that arena, which then led me into essentially everything from private jet charters and sales, buying exotic cars and investment, a little bit in the yacht industry, some watches, kind of a lot of things pertaining to high-end luxury lifestyle. But then, for me, I just realized that based upon what I built and the skills that I have, especially around the sales and marketing and understanding just the fundamentals of how businesses operate, regardless of industry sector, whether it's equestrian or then obviously clients I work with now, kind of led me to then what we do today, which is with Arc Advisory, around actually helping the businesses, and we obviously we're going to go into that, so I won't go too far down that right now. But so yeah, been living in Florida, and I see basically the rest of my life in the States for sure.
But when you went into advisory and M&A prep work, what gap did you identify in the market? Was there a specific client case that shaped your model?
Honestly, kind of interesting enough, it didn't. It was more a case of that I had a few sort of people, friends of mine that were essentially trying to figure out running relatively small businesses. For us, a small business is sort of $2 to $10 million in terms of revenue, top line revenue. And, we realized that a lot really it came from a lot of these guys were just struggling to figure out how to grow the businesses. They've become stagnant for a variety of different reasons. And typically, a lot of the time, it either comes down to sales and marketing. That's normally one of the key obviously, that's the key revenue driver around any business. But a lot of these guys typically just didn't know how to really tweak that. And so I just took what I knew in the sales and marketing arena and just kind of helped implement those avenues, and then realized quite quickly that a lot of these guys, and again, I feel this is like a very much US mentality, is a lot around, especially now in today's world where we're seeing such a huge we're seeing such a big wealth transfer with baby boomers retiring, and there's predicted somewhere in the region of $85 trillion worth of wealth that's going to be transferring over the next decade or so. And we're seeing a lot of people now just mentally be like, okay, as we're growing our business, where is the exit play? Private equity is becoming such a big arena now, especially in the States, that people are kind of engineering their business in a way whereby how do we think about actually how we sell in the end? So obviously a lot of people out there look at business from a lifestyle standpoint, but I just noticed the mentality shifted now more towards, okay, of course the business is following a lifestyle, but then what is the ultimate play and what's the ultimate goal? And that's kind of how essentially we were like birthed out of the fact that like there is very little resources out there to actually help prepare business owners to maximize the valuation of the company on an exit.
Comparing the US to the UK, you see very few services like this in the UK. Why is it so much big? I know obviously the States has 360 million people versus our 60 mil, but apart from that, why do you think these services are so much more in demand in the US as opposed to the UK? What's the difference in mentality that you've noticed? Obviously, being British to coming to live in the US and talking to entrepreneurs in the US compared to where I am.
Yeah. I would say firstly, just entrepreneurship in general is just more rewarded in the States. I feel that, just on a base level, just even at the very foundation level, setting up a business in the US takes me probably about 90 seconds on the internet to go in, file an LLC, which is our version of a limited company, register it with the state and basically put everything together, submit it, and then wait for the state to approve it, which again, typically takes a couple of days. So not even in some cases. So I think just the foundation level, you have just the ease of getting into business. And then I just noticed in the States, generally speaking, that businesses are geared towards being more, again, firstly as a lifestyle to fund their lifestyle, but then I feel like, again, as private equity has grown, I feel like it's a big case of, really what we're seeing, the fact that people are looking at more, like services like mine exist more predominantly nowadays because of the fact that we are seeing, good or bad, right? Good, this is good and bad, but like private equity is now really starting to generate a huge amount of market share when it comes to certain industry sectors, especially when we look at the trades businesses, HVAC companies, roofing, electrical companies, things like that. We're seeing a lot of these big private equity firms that are coming in just basically, buying these smaller companies and putting them together and potentially rolling them up as a sale or whatever they're looking to do on the back end. So I would just say we're seeing a lot more of that activity. The availability of capital is a lot greater. Borrowing capital is a lot easier. And so it's just allowing, we have certain loans. We have there's SBA loans, the Small Business Administration offers certain loans that helps people acquire businesses, just at a lower level that isn't the private equity level. So I feel like we have a better foundation that just allows for more accessibility when it comes to either people buying businesses or selling them.
Yeah, there's the SBA loan is fantastic. I mean, it allows a lot of people to buy companies with no money down or very little money down. We have nothing like that in the UK. And UK sellers don't like earnouts, they don't like LBOs, they want all their cash up front, so they never sell. Why do most founders overestimate their readiness to sell? What is the common ground you find? Financial opacity, founder dependency, informal governance. What are the reasons?
You ask me like when it comes to like
why do they overestimate their readiness to sell?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean there's obviously a lot of key factors here, and I'll try and keep it high level. By all means, we can go deeper on any of these, but for us, typically, when we start working business owner, typically there's a certain ego, but there's also a pride with that, right? Because generally speaking, just at the foundation level, a lot of these business owners may have owned the company 30, 40 years. They probably spent more time in their business than they do with their wife or their husband, their kids, their family in general. Of course, there's a certain amount of emotional attachment, right, when it comes to having a business. And then, there's a lot of emotion when it comes to selling the business. Of course, we're going to go down that route, and we can talk about that in a little bit. But, when you just look at that standpoint, I think let's talk about this. I think a lot of business owners don't quite understand what is required when it comes to actually selling a business. A lot of the time, and this is pretty much every business I've ever worked with, just at the basic level, just having a lack of actually documenting what they do every single day as a business owner. And our rule of thumb is, or our test is, when we go to a business owner, hey, if you could take a 30-day vacation, like tomorrow, you could leave, or even today. Let's say today, right now, in the next hour, you're going to leave for a 30-day vacation. What is going to happen? Are the wheels going to fall off? Is the business going to stop generating revenue? What's going to happen? And if the reality is the business stops working, all the gears essentially grind to a halt, then clearly right from square one, it shows the business can't be sold because the owner is too ingrained in the company to be able to actually even look at an exit. So that's really just from the starting point. But then it comes to, for example, a lot of businesses just don't really understand their numbers. They have no clue what their KPIs are. They have no clue where their money is coming from, where they're generating it, how much money they ultimately have left when they're at the end of the day, and just having no clear metrics around that. And then, as I said before, just the lack of systems and process. They don't have documented. They don't have, for every person in the business, what do they do every day? What are the steps they take, and how all that fits into the overall ecosystem of the company. So, and that's just from that standpoint alone can deter a lot of guys from actually maximizing the valuation of the business. Because in a day, when you look at the private equity guys or guys that want to, and M&A guys, they're trying to figure out where we can, extract value, and we can talk about the pillars that engineer essentially enterprise value, and we can go into that in a minute. But just those things alone really makes a business very difficult to sell, just from a foundation standpoint.
How much discount does that create? When someone's just not got everything in place. I mean, do I have to give away a lot of value?
Exponential value. I mean, even if you look at, for example, just the clientele of the business, who they serve, if the majority of the clientele is tied to the business owner, they're buddies of his, or the business owner is the sales guy for the organization. He's the one constantly getting out of the business. They have the relationship with him. The reality is, when a business sells, there's always a drop off of clients. When a business changes ownership, regardless of how smooth you engineer that process, is always going to be a drop off. But if that clientele base is either too concentrated, by meaning that we have, maybe there's two clients that bring in 67% of the revenue of the company, that's a huge red flag for a business buyer. And so that can drastically, decrease the value of a business.
When if I was going to sell my business today, or if I wanted to sell my business, if I'm thinking about it, how much lead time should I give myself?
Yeah,
I mean, that's prepared.
Yeah, I mean that's a lot of it depends, of course, on the size of the business. Typically, for us, we like to engage probably at least 2 years prior to a company looking to sell. But again, that really comes down to obviously how prepared that business is, and again, I can kind of walk you through the pillars that we use when it comes to actually identifying where there's bottlenecks or weaknesses within a company, and the areas that we can essentially help optimize for engineering the value, which then helps the business owner get massive value for their business. But yeah, generally speaking, we like a good 2 year sort of runway to preparing a company for then looking to exit.
And in that 2 years, you hold their hand and walk them through what they need to do and what they don't do. So what is ARC's exit readiness methodology? What systems do you put in place? Tell us a little bit more about ARC, how you operate, and what you actually do for the client.
Yeah. So essentially, we have what's called six pillars, and these six pillars essentially engineer enterprise value for the business. So this is kind of like how we come in and we grade a company. So, say for example, you go to your doctor and you do a full, like I just went in last week and did a full, physical. I tested my blood work, my biomarkers, my body fat percentage, like this thing called a DEXA scan, where they scan your bone density, all these things, right? And we get this report that tells me where the areas I need to improve and where the areas are good, etc. So we do a very similar thing for a business. So we have a proprietary software where essentially we'll sit down with a business owner and we'll just ask some basic questions. We'll start with, okay, the revenue standpoint, and then we'll just walk them through everything. And this is the six pillars. So the first one is strategic. So essentially, what is your North Star? And by what I mean is, what is the goal? What are you looking to achieve? What is your business doing? What does your business do? Where does it serve in the marketplace? Then we have organizational, and there's two parts to this. The first one being, what is their mission, vision, values? And so, and we spend a lot of time with business owners just actually understanding, like, again, back to who do they serve, but what is their core values, and how does that fit within the marketplace? What is their unique selling point? Who do they serve? What is their, what are the goals of the business, and how does everyone within, basically, do the employees understand what the goal of the business is here? Do they know what we're looking to achieve? And is everybody on that same, organizational standpoint? And then, of course, from there, employees. So do they have a leadership team in place? Do they have, what does their talent pool look like? Are employees turning over every month? Are they staying around for 5, 10 years? And again, that's a big area when it comes to evaluating a business is, are the employees around for a long, long time? Likelihood is they're going to stay within the transition. But if they're turning over every few months, again, another huge red flag that can massively affect the valuation of the business on the sale. Fourth is customers. So it's kind of, as I was saying before, two parts: is customer retention, but also customer concentration. So are, one, two, three, five customers bringing in, 60%, 70% of the revenue of the business? And then are they one-time sales? Is it a recurring revenue model where they consistently, either weekly, monthly sales? And then is there a way, if they don't have a recurring revenue model, can we bring in a recurring revenue model within the business to help bolster the revenue? And then obviously from that goes into the financials. So of course, just really getting a clear map of what the financials look like. What do they have in place? What debt do they potentially have in the books? Where are they bleeding money? Is there any areas that we can maybe tighten the tap and not be bleeding money in certain things? So there's certain employees that maybe aren't maximizing as they should. Are they getting paid too much, paying too less? Like all these little kind of nuances within the financial side. And then not so big in the States at the moment, but ESG, so economic social governance. So again, does the business meet regulatory standards, especially if it's in an area where there's a lot of obviously regulatory issues or environmental issues, things like that. So they could potentially have an effect on someone that's buying the business. So that's really the kind of six pillars. So when we look at those six pillars, essentially, as I said, we really sit down for 2-3 hours with a business owner and walk them through all these different areas. And then from that, we get a big report basically print out and basically identifies to us, and we can show them, okay, these are the areas that we need to focus on. And then these are the things we need to focus on first. Like you would if you went to a doctor and they said, hey, there's certain things, your cholesterol's high, we've got to do this, and this. All right, let's focus on this first, and then we'll move to the next piece and next piece. Hence why I say typically 2 years is a good window for us to essentially get these things all kind of to a good baseline that we can help with an exit.
What does exit readiness mean in practical terms?
Firstly, that's a great question. Exit readiness can really mean different things to different owners, right? Because we have a lot of owners that they're selling a business, but they don't necessarily want to retire. And that's something we can talk about in a minute when it comes to the sort of the human side of selling a business. A lot of business owners actually want to stay involved. They want to be, because in the day, as we said, A lot of times these business owners have owned the business 20, 30, 40 years. It's their baby. It's one of their kids. Yeah. And so for them, it's not always about the financial, element of, okay, I'm going to make a bunch of money in the sale. They also want to make sure the business is successful after they leave. So a lot of times it's a case of, either in that scenario that they can sell a business, by which I mean it's transferable without them, but they can still be involved maybe at consultancy level and just help the business owner with the transition. But when it comes to exit readiness, it comes down to obviously really buttoning up the 6 pillars that we talked about. And then from there, again, understanding based upon that, who is the buyer of this business. And then from there, does our metrics match up with what that buyer would look to want? And then does that also fit in with how the current founder, the business owner, is looking to sell under those conditions?
But talking about valuations again, just for a minute, I noticed that I talked to quite a few M&A guys in the States, and M&A, multiples in the States seem to be 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12 times. Whereas in the UK, for the average type of business, it's 3 times if you're lucky. Why such a big difference, and why such huge multiples?
I'm gonna see. I don't see that so much, to be honest.
Right.
I would say there's a lot of factors, right? I mean, of course, industry has a huge factor on the multiple business sells for, and then other is the recurring revenue side. So if a business has a lot of recurring revenue, then of course that can help bolster the valuation, therefore the exit multiple. But a lot of companies we work with, revenue of course is a massive driver in multiple too. Of course, the higher the revenue, the greater the multiple. But for us, typically, as I said, the businesses we work with are north of 2 million, but really up to 20 to 30 million. That's kind of our sweet spot. And those businesses typically trade, on the low end, 3x multiple, but, 6 to 7, if we can bring in. And that's also part of what we do, right? So part of the report that we get is we can actually tell them, okay, based upon, and the report pulls this together and actually identifies this, based upon everything we're seeing right now and basically how you score in all these six pillars, your business today could sell for X. However, if we did blah, 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 your business could sell, in a year or 2 years for Y. And we can actually identify that, which honestly is my favorite thing, because it really shows business owner like, wow, like we can make these certain tweaks and it can massively affect the value. But then, to answer your question, again, I think it just comes down to, as I was saying before, just the surge of private equity, especially in the past 10, 15 years, where we're seeing so many of these big private equity firms that are doing these big roll-ups, and they can afford to pay more because of the fact that they know that it can exit for such a greater multiple when they really start to combine the revenue of a lot of these small organizations. So, and then just, I would say also just the cost of capital too. Even though we're in a high interest rate market, I would say that it's easier to get capital, and therefore I think it's easier to deploy it. And private equity is a great investment. People feel safe investing in businesses, especially if they've been around for 20, 30 years. It's a smart place to park capital.
Do you find family offices are part of that private equity banner?
Yeah, absolutely. It depends obviously a lot on the type of business and the revenue of that business. That the last thing they're looking to do is buy, something that's maybe in the $2 to $5 million range where they have to be too hands-on involved. But yeah, I mean, a lot of times though, when it comes to family office, they'll invest through a fund. So they'll typically invest into a private equity firm, and then that private firm takes the capital and turns around and actually acquires companies. So you get a mix of both, right? But yeah.
Do you find your initial chat or your initial talk when it's a family office will be with their advisor before you
Yeah, I mean,
the main owners?
yeah, it's a little both. I mean, again, if I go to my equestrian background and dealing with ultra high net worth, I'm very fortunate in the fact that I have access to a lot of these guys because of the equestrian world. I typically I'm able to actually speak with those guys, and most of the time it kind of goes the other way. I have a conversation, and then they link me in with somebody in the family office organization that actually will continue the conversation. So I'm very fortunate in that just my background allows me the access to these guys. So rather than having to work my way up, it's typically the other way around.
Very
Very
good.
unique.
You could even become an advisor. Where does
Yeah.
technology or automation increase enterprise value within the companies you're dealing with?
Yeah, I mean, look, as we know, right, we're going through this AI revolution right now. A lot of the business owners we work with are, I would say 80% of the businesses that we come across are wanting to implement AI in some way. I think we're past this. Well, I don't, okay, maybe it's not a fair statement to make, but I think we're to a certain extent past this fear around AI. But and I think a lot of business owners, even the older, sort of close to the retiree age, baby boomer business owners, they want to figure out how to implement AI into the business because they know it does save, time, it saves energy, it saves money, it saves human resources. So they want to figure it out. And for me, I geek out over AI, so I'm always looking at how we can start to implement it in the business we work with. And in a day, like our proprietary software, that we create this report is built around AI. So yeah, I would say it's becoming even more, it's easier, especially the way the AI is evolving right now, it's becoming easier for the individual person. It's not requiring, coders and these high level tech guys. It's becoming easier to implement and understand. Guys want to figure it out, and so we're figuring out aggressively how we can help, incorporate that. And honestly, that probably would help decrease the timeline when it comes to getting a business ready to exit if we can start to incorporate and if I guess add efficiencies much quicker than we have in the past prior to AI.
How do you coordinate with brokers, legal, tax advisors, and wealth advisors?
So, like, how do you mean? Sorry.
Well, in the process of selling the business or selling a business for someone, how do you actually coordinate with all their other advisors from tax to legals,
Yeah.
etc.?
Yeah. Great question. I mean,
I mean, is that
we've had
over
a
a
couple.
2 year period as well? Or is it towards the end? How does it work?
Yeah, it depends on obviously what we're looking to achieve, right? Every use case is a little bit different. But we have our own, of course, we have trusted partners we work with that we would help if they don't have these guys. I mean, a lot of these, I would say the typical CPA for a lot of the companies we work with has very limited understanding of selling a business or limited involvement in selling a business. And then, of course, what the tax implications look like within selling a business. So most of the time, typically, we'll bring in one of our trusted advisors to assist when it comes to that. But that they're part of the process, right? Like, we like to. I would say it's not obviously stage one or stage two, but I would say typically as we're starting to, really put a kind of a flag in the sand and say, okay, well, we're looking at being ready to exit in the next, maybe year to 18 months period. Then we'll start to figure out more so from the tax standpoint and more so understanding the financial implications of selling. And then the legal is typically like kind of more of a last thing, because most of the time, on the legal side it is more on the buyer than it is necessarily on the seller side. The seller side is more about reviewing documentation, understanding the deal, and making sure it makes sense. But from the accountancy side and bringing in a financial advisor that understands what the tax implications are and then how we can actually structure to obviously mitigate the taxes as best as we can. That's a pretty early on thing for us. Yeah.
What's the tax implications of the States? I mean, in Canada or in the UK, you get entrepreneurs tax relief, like on the first million or whatever it is. Is there anything like that in the States?
Um, it depends on it depends on the state is the actual answer to that. I mean, we're one nation, but we have 50 different states and 50 different tax laws and 50 different structures. So where I live in Florida, we have no state income tax, so that's obviously a massive advantage for us compared to like states like New York and LA. But without getting too much in the weeds, typically we'll depending on it really depends on how big the liquidity event is, how large that is. But generally speaking, we'll look to structure things in a way whereby, we'll put together a trust for them. We'll figure out certain investments they can make to reduce the taxable income. We have this beautiful thing called Section 179 in the States where essentially you can invest in, okay, oil is a great example. You can go out and invest in certain like oil assets where, there's or even private jets or even high-end cars that weigh over 5,000 pounds to essentially write off the entire taxable income. So there's certain things we can look to do where we can kind of deploy capital in certain areas that really helps mitigate the tax as much as possible. And then, looking at certain trust formations that will also reduce the taxable income. So it isn't like there isn't just, as you said, from your standpoint, like, isn't just there. We actually physically have to go out and figure out where the best tax.
You have to be creative.
You have to be exactly. Thank you. You have to be creative in how you go about structuring these things. Yeah.
So a large part of your offering, from what I understand, is actually helping them plan for after the exit. Tell me more about that. How do you deal with that, and what sort of things do you look at, and what do you do? What do you plan? How do you help?
Yeah, and this comes down to, as I said, there's a lot of emotional, obviously, a lot of emotions involved when it comes to selling a business, and that can be a major hindrance on when it comes to selling a business because you look at, if you're looking to sell a private equity, I mean, they're going to come in and pick apart every bit of the business, and they're going to figure out ways that you haven't maximized value and the areas that they can pick at and basically reduce the value. And obviously, with that, it can be extremely stressful time. It can bring a lot of emotions, especially it's like you have someone coming in and picking on your child and saying oh, like, your child's slow, or it's this or it's that, it's not tall enough, like, there is crazy things, right? So we try and really look at, okay, what's the goal after you sell? Because the reality is there's only a certain amount of golf rounds you can play right after you sell. There's only a certain amount things you can do like that.
It becomes like a job.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And so, as I said, there's a lot more selling the business, just purely the financial gain from the sale. And so for us is we contract with a group that basically will sit down and help them plan what we call the fourth quarter. So what is the fourth quarter of their life? So, what things do they have to look forward to? What can we do? Because the reality is, a lot of times, especially we have a husband and wife. The husband's obviously been running this business 30, 40 years. Potentially, as they come back home and now they're not going to business every day, that can create issues maybe in their home life. And so we really try and yeah, exactly. Unfortunately, it can lead to marital issues. I don't have the numbers, but you look at when it comes to people retiring, it's especially a little bit earlier. I think the death rate is a little bit higher because that's not using your brain anymore, not having a purpose, right? And that's really what comes to what is your purpose after you sell the business.
So, do you agree with Donald Trump that when you retire, you expire?
I think there's a certain element of that. Yes, there's a certain element to that, and so our goal is helping these business owners figure out what they want to do afterwards. There's certain trips they want to do, certain family things they want to do. Do they want to maybe start another business? Do they want to maybe go consult for a company? Are they staying involved in this company? There's certain things we'll look at there. So we work with another group that really, that's all they do. They just specialize in helping business owners essentially maximize the fourth quarter of their lives. So what are they going to do post sale?
Is that quite a long process? I mean, how long do you stay sort of involved?
It can be. For us, that's not really, as I said, we work with another group that specializes in that. That's not part of our like offering within ARC. So that's something that they'll do, and so really our involvement is focusing on how we can maximize the value of the business. And then we bring in trusted partners to focus on the other side. But to your point, they'll stay involved, with that post sale and maybe sometime post sale as well, and maybe they'll meet with the group and just figure out, is there certain areas maybe they feel that they're lacking and they can help. So they kind of operate kind of more of a counsel role, I would say, in the sense of how to continue to ensure they have a structured life planning post sale, and they continue to operate in a way that they're having a fulfilled life. Not just from a financial standpoint, but when it comes to their personal life and home life, social life, etc.
How many vendors basically have a post-sale plan?
Generally speaking, very minimal.
Really?
to none. Yeah, I would say
Do you
most.
find that they lose identity and it
Yes,
affects them psychologically?
100%, 100%. There's a huge psychological wall, for sure, and I think, yeah, I honestly I hadn't spoken to really any very few business owners we speak to. When you ask that question, what's their plan after the sale? They sit back and they honestly think, well, actually, I don't know. And again, they think, oh yeah, I'm gonna go play golf. I'm gonna go, God, go to the beach. I'm just gonna go live that. And as I said, the reality is they rise pretty quickly. That gets very boring. And as you said, their identity's been wrapped to this business for decades in some cases. And so losing that identity can be a huge burden, and hence why I believe it leads to a quicker death rate. And so it's something that I believe that they don't really think about, and unfortunately till it's too late, and then they're having issues at home, and they're realizing that they honestly regret selling the business in a lot of cases. So that's where we really like to get ahead of that, ensure that they really do have a clear plan post sale.
I think definitely keeping working keeps people young, keeps them up to speed, keeps their brain active, keeps them in touch with younger people. I just think it changes everything. Looking at market demographics and landscape, are we heading into a buyer's market or a seller's market? How are multiples sort of trending in your segments?
Yeah, I would say, back sort of right after COVID, when we had extremely low interest rate markets, and it was very easy to borrow and get capital. We had a lot of M&A activity. I've noticed in the last couple of years, well, I'd say kind of 23 to 25, M&A slowed down a lot just because the cost of capital was higher. What I'm noticing too a lot more is, and sellers are actually appreciating more is, I know, and we talked about before on this call that, leverage buyouts and earnouts are very taboo in the UK. They're becoming very normal in the States, especially again, when you look at we're in a higher interest market environment, we a lot of times the cash flow of the business can't support the debt. So sellers are actually being more willing to be creative around how they sell the business by either doing some kind of leverage buyout or seller financing a portion of the business to essentially allow for the business to be sold. And of course, that does help when it comes to a lot of these guys would prefer to get a monthly annuity as opposed to just taking a big lump sum of cash and being like, well, what do I do with this now? I have a massive tax burden, and I'm going to lose maybe 50% of this to taxes right off the bat. And then I've got this money, like, what do I do with? So a lot of actually sellers are really liking the idea of maybe setting up some kind of structured seller finance model where, yeah, they're getting a monthly annuity for the sale of the business. They're not having to pay tax on the entire sale right out the gate. And so I'm noticing that's becoming more prevalent nowadays, and actually sellers are being more receptive and willing to offer that. And even, we do a lot of real estate as well on the side, and we're doing a lot. I've noticed too, especially on the commercial assets, we're looking at a piece of seller financing is becoming very normal nowadays, where maybe 5-6 years ago that was extremely off limits conversation. People would think that it would kind of be if you said, hey, would you potentially seller finance, the general reaction would be, oh, do you not have enough money to buy my business, or type of mentality. Whereas nowadays it's becoming very, very normal and very customary to actually structure business sale in that way.
I've spoken to quite a lot of M&A companies, and I found that there's M&A companies that deal with obviously for sale, but I've also found there's quite a few consultants out there that just deal with increasing value and getting people ready to sell, and then but they don't do for sale. You're the first company that I've come across that does both. Apart from that, what's your differentiating factor within the M&A world?
Yeah, for us, again, I think the fact that we have this kind of holistic view, right? The fact that for us, number one, we're able to actually, when we first engage with a client, we can run them through our proprietary model and really get them a clear snapshot of actually the health of the business. And then, as I said to you before, we have the snapshot of that, but then we have the snapshot of, okay, well, if we fix these things, we take your business from trading, a 2.5x multiple at this revenue number or this EBITDA number to then, a 6x multiple at this EBITDA number. And so just that alone is something that most M&A guys can't even like show to their clients. But then for us, just that post-sale aspect too, right? And all the steps involved the way. We have our trusted sort of set of advisors when it comes to the tax side of things, the legal side, and then we have the group that we work with that specializes in helping on the I guess the psychological side and just the health side of that seller on the back end, which is something that I don't know any other companies out there that just offer that whole approach, because it is a journey. It's not necessarily about just the actual, the day you close. It's the journey, it's the steps that lead up to that, and then it's the post that as well. And so for us, we can kind of bring that all under one umbrella, hence ARC, and offer that to our clientele and basically be a guide along the way, rather than them just having to, I work with this guy for one thing, I work with this guy for the other thing. We can keep it all within our sphere. Yeah, exactly. And I think our clients, like that, and they know they just have one group of people that understands the business really from day one, and it's not a case of other guys coming in having to understand, everything from scratch in different aspects. We can bring it all together in a nice way.
What's the sweet spot for you for a typical client?
Yeah, for us, we're very industry agnostic, but like really minimum of 2 million in revenue is up to about 20 or 30 million. That's typically our sweet spot. Really under 2 million, it's going to struggle for us to really engage in a way that makes sense. We have in the past, helped companies that have, around 1 million, but it's just not. Unfortunately, at that point, it's difficult for our model to work in the sense that they just don't have quite enough revenue for us to really go out and physically unlock certain areas or help them maybe invest capital in certain areas we know that they need to do and to actually really increase their valuation. So typically for us, 2 million is kind of our bottom that we'll work with.
A couple of questions before we start to slow down. Average term of an engagement is 2 years. How do you charge over that 2 year period?
Yeah, mostly it's based on a retainer. So what we do is we structure things in 9-day sprints. So essentially we'll, based upon what we get from our valuation report, we'll identify obviously steps 1 through, whatever, what needs to be achieved and what certain aspects we want to hit first. And based upon that, we'll figure it out into 9-day sprints. We'll identify the first 9 days, these are the areas we want to target first. And then after that, next 9 days, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then from there, we'll basically, typically a monthly retainer model. And then that's obviously based upon, our engagement is based upon the fact that we are helping that owner hit these, KPIs, these points that we both have agreed upon we're going to hit in each 9-day sprint. And that's really how we ensure that we consistently provide value to our business owners, but at the same time, they're also ensuring that they stay engaged with us, that they commit to the plan we put together. So it's kind of almost like you work with a fitness coach, right? And you have a plan to lose amount of weight or gain a certain amount of body mass or whatever. This obviously is a two-way street, right? The coach can only provide so much, but the owner has to provide it as well. So, that's where 90 days for us, we find is a sweet spot to actually ensure that we can just focus on, hitting the benchmarks we need to make. And then once that 9 days up, then we focus on the next 9 days.
How do you find your clients, and how do you create visibility apart from obviously podcasts like this?
Yeah, there's a lot through word of mouth, some stuff through LinkedIn, but we typically a lot through word of mouth. And again, just from networks, myself and my partners are in. Two of my partners are certified exit planning advisors, so they have the CPER credential, which basically is part of our certification for business for exit planning. And so through that as well, that gives us a lot of exposure and access, and there's a lot of business owners like find this network and they essentially reach out to us through the certification in that network. And financial advisors are a big one for us. Financial advisors are one of our main areas we get business from because they have the clients. They're already working with the clients, and maybe they're planning the clients kind of strategy when it comes to the next 5 years, and maybe that client's like, hey, look, I want to sell the business in 3 years. And so that's when they'll come to us and be like, hey, I have this client wants to sell, let's figure out, because at the end of the day, it's a great two-way street, because they're providing huge value for their business owner. But of course, if we're helping increase the value, therefore there'll be more money to manage on the back end. So business financial advisors are a big one for us.
What's your priorities over the next 12, 24 months? What's your plans? What's your views?
Yeah, for us, really diving into AI on a very big level. It's obviously the advancements are so fast and changing so much that trying to get ahead of it is impossible, of course. But for me, that's really one of my main agendas, is really understanding how we can really put together a package where AI can come in and really accelerate our ability to maximize value of businesses without it costing a fortune for a business owner. And yeah, so part of that as well is just really, as I said, identifying those areas, how we can implement AI in a way where also the business owner feels comfortable about bringing AI, and it's not such a scary element. Like I said earlier, the statistics show that 80% of business owners want to implement AI. They actually are willing to, and they want to figure out how to do it, but they have no clue where to start. So part of what I'm really focusing on right now is how we can implement it in a way whereby they feel comfortable about what we're implementing, and they see the value, and we can do it in a much quicker way. So basically condensing this 2-year timeline down quite drastically. That's one of my priorities.
If you could change one thing about how founders think about exit planning, what would it be?
I would say that looking at the business, really them trying to understand that there's them and the business. It's not like that. It's not them within the business. So they're working on the business, not within it. That's what I'm trying to say. Because that's really the biggest area we find of difficulty, is that these owners are so ingrained in the business. As I said earlier, we asked the question, can you step away for 30 days and the business still runs? And if the answer is no, it's a massive bottleneck, and that's a massive issue. So for us, just trying to get the mentality around that we have to document everything we do. We have to document our systems, our SOPs, our standard operating procedures, that these can be handed off to other people. And that is a very difficult thing to really get a business owner to really get their head around, because most of the 9% of the time it's all locked up in their brain and it's not documented. And so that for us is probably the biggest challenge that we face in what we do. And really, because again, it's very easy for all of us, and I'm guilty of it, like anyone else, saying, well, I can just do that. That takes 30 seconds, takes 2 minutes, let me just get it done. And the reality is, sure, it doesn't take a lot of time, but that's not the best way to really ensure the business grows without you being involved. And so as hard as it is, helping them understand that we have to take time to document these things. And sure, it's a lot of work, it's a lot of time up front, but ultimately it's a massive requirement of a business when it comes to the growing and selling.
So I suppose, your advice to founders not yet thinking about exit would be to document everything, get everything ready, etc., the way you just said.
Exactly. It's really looking at each aspect of the business and ensuring that everyone that works in the organization, everything that they do is documented. And it sounds like a miserable, painstaking process, but it's really not. To be honest, it's not that painstaking, but at the same time, it's just so critical to really identify that stuff. And especially it helps so much when you are onboarding new employees to have everything documented. Okay, this is exactly what you do every day. These are the steps that are involved. It just at a granular, unfortunately as it is, at a granular level is critical. And really, because that's ultimately how businesses scale, right? It's really obviously maximizing how they operate strategically, the procedures they operate under, and just building upon those. And honestly, sometimes we come into companies and we'll streamline all these things, we'll help them get these things worked out. And then all of a sudden the business owner's like, well, wait a minute, I now have X amount more hours per week. Maybe I only have to work 4 days a week. You know, the business is running when I'm not there. I maybe don't want to sell it. And we get that sometimes too, that they realize that now, because they were so stressed under the weight of having to run a business, that's why they wanted to, maybe one of the reasons why they wanted to exit. But now all of a sudden we freed up the time, brain capacity, that they don't need to sell, because they've removed that stress.
Anyway, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we've helped them
And
one
they
way or
do
another.
sell, maybe in 3 or 4 years' time, they'll come back to you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that could happen too. Yeah.
So, okay, I thought this was very good. It's really good to talk to you. If listeners, obviously, and business owners want to find out more about you, Ash, and about your company, how do they get hold of you?
Probably LinkedIn's probably one of the easiest ways. So just look me up on LinkedIn, Ash Atkinson. That's probably I'd say the easiest way to get in touch with me. Yeah.
And one last question. Is exit a transaction or a transformation?
That's a great question. Definitely a transformation. As I said, as we've talked about for this entire kind of conversation, that there's so many steps involved. It's not the destination, the day you sell. It's not about that. It's everything that leads up to it and everything that happens after it. So yeah, absolutely, it's a transformation.
All right, great. Well, we've all heard where we can get hold of Ash in the future and learn more about his business. I'm Gary from A1 Solutions signing off. Thank you for attending another episode of Wise Tech for Wise Money, and we'll speak to you in a few days. Ash, hang on, I'd love to have another chat with you. But thank you everybody for listening in, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you. Thanks, Ash.
Thank you, Gary.